The Alaskan wilderness howled with the fury of an unforgiving blizzard. Snow whipped through the air, reducing visibility to mere feet and turning the landscape into a white void. It was through this maelstrom that a sleek, silver object plummeted from the sky, leaving a trail of smoke and debris in its wake. Inside the craft, alarms blared as Zira, lead scout of the Arcturus exploration fleet, fought to regain control. Her four-fingered hands danced across holographic interfaces, but it was no use. The ship's quantum drive had been irreparably damaged by an unexpected solar flare. "Mayday, Mayday," Zira transmitted, her melodic voice tinged with urgency. "Scout ship Zeta 9 going down on uncharted planet. Coordinates." The transmission cut off as the ship slammed into the frozen earth, carving a deep furrow through the snow-covered forest before coming to a violent stop against an ancient pine. For a moment, all was silence save for the howling wind. Then, with a hiss of escaping pressure, a hatch on the ship's side slid open. Zira emerged, her life form wrapped in a shimmering suit that adjusted to the planet's atmosphere in real time. She surveyed the damage with eyes that glowed a soft blue in the twilight. The ship was beyond repair, at least with the tools at her disposal. Zira's mandibles clicked in frustration as she realized the gravity of her situation. "Activate emergency beacon," she commanded. A small device on her wrist pulsed in response, sending out a signal that would take days to reach her homeworld. Zira knew the protocol. In the event of a crash on a potentially hostile planet, scouts were to avoid contact with any native species at all costs. But as the temperature dropped and the wind howled, she realized that survival might necessitate breaking that rule. In the distance, through the swirling snow, a faint light caught her attention. Squinting, Zira could just make out the outline of a primitive dwelling, a wooden structure that stood in defiance of the storm. She hesitated, weighing her options. The beacon would eventually bring rescue, but could she survive the harsh conditions until then? And what of the mission? This might be an opportunity to gather crucial intelligence on this world's inhabitants. Decision made, Zira activated another device on her suit. Her form shimmered, and within moments, her alien features were replaced by approximation of the planet's dominant species, based on data gathered during their approach. Now, to any observer, she appeared as a human woman with pale skin and striking blue eyes. Her suit transformed into tattered winter clothing, completing the illusion of a traveler caught in the storm. Zira took a step towards the distant cabin, then faltered. The gravity here was stronger than she was used to, and the cold was seeping through her disguise. She'd have to be careful not to reveal her true nature through any inadvertent display of alien physiology or knowledge. As she trudged through the snow, Zira's mind raced. Who inhabited that dwelling? Would they be hostile? Could she manipulate them into providing shelter without revealing her true purpose? The wind picked up, nearly knocking her off her feet. Zira stumbled, actually grateful for the authenticity it lent to her performance. She was close now, close enough to see smoke curling from a chimney, promising warmth within. Summoning her strength, Zira forced herself forward. She had a mission to complete, a duty to her people. This unfortunate crash could still yield valuable data on a potential conquest. All she had to do was convince whoever was inside that cabin to take her in. As she reached the rough-hewn door, Zira allowed herself a small smile. Then, schooling her features into an expression of desperation and fear, emotion she had studied but never truly felt, she raised her fist and knocked. The sound echoed in the howling wind. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, Zira heard movement inside. Heavy footsteps approached the door. Zira steeled herself. First contact was imminent. Everything depended on the next few moments. As the door began to open, she prepared to give the performance of her life. The fate of two worlds hung in the balance, though only Zira knew it. The storm raged on, indifferent to the cosmic drama unfolding in its midst. The door creaked open, revealing a tall, broad-shouldered man silhouetted against the warm light from inside. Jack Hawthorne squinted into the swirling snow, his weathered face a mask of suspicion and surprise. "Please," Zira gasped, her voice trembling with carefully crafted desperation. "Help me." Jack's hand tightened on the doorframe, his knuckles white. For a moment, he seemed frozen, caught between caution and compassion. Then, unbidden, a memory flashed through his mind. Asterisk sand instead of snow, the desperate eyes of a child. A hidden, explosive asterisk. Jack shook his head, dispelling the image. "How did you get out here?" he demanded, voice gruff. Zira, sensing his hesitation, pressed her advantage. She swayed on her feet, allowing her knees to buckle slightly. "Car. Broke down," she managed, teeth chattering convincingly. "I saw your light. Please, I'm so cold." Jack's jaw clenched. Every instinct honed from years in combat screamed at him to shut the door, to protect himself. But the medic in him, the part he tried so hard to bury, couldn't turn away someone in need. With a muttered curse, he stepped back. "Get in," he said curtly, "but don't try anything funny." Zira stumbled inside, marveling at the primitive yet ingenious construction of the cabin. A fire crackled in a stone hearth, filling the single room with warmth and the scent of burning pine. Jack closed the door against the howling wind, then turned to face his unexpected guest. His eyes, a deep brown that had seen too much suffering, scanned Zira with professional detachment. "You're lucky to be alive out there," he said, moving to a cupboard and pulling out a thick blanket. "Here, get warm." Zira accepted the blanket, wrapping it around herself as she'd seen in human behavioral studies. "Thank you," she said softly, injecting her voice with gratitude. "I'm Zira." "Jack," he replied shortly. He gestured to a worn armchair near the fire. "Sit. I'll make some coffee." As Jack busied himself with an ancient-looking percolator, Zira took the opportunity to study him more closely. He moved with the practiced efficiency of a soldier, but there was a gentleness in how he prepared the coffee that intrigued her. "You live out here alone?" Zira asked, trying to gather information. Jack grunted an affirmative, his back to her as he worked. "It must get lonely," Zira pressed, adopting the sympathetic tone. Jack turned, his eyes hard. "I like lonely," he said flatly. "Keeps things simple." Zira nodded, realizing she'd have to tread carefully. This human was more perceptive than she'd anticipated. She decided to change tactics. "I'm sorry to intrude," she said, letting a note of shame color her voice. "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't opened the door. I thought I might." She trailed off, letting Jack fill in the blank. Jack's expression softened almost imperceptibly. He poured 2 mugs of coffee and brought one to Zira. "Here," he said, his tone a bit gentler. "This'll warm you up." Zira accepted the mug, careful to mimic human movements. She took a sip and nearly choked. The bitter liquid was unlike anything in her experience. "Strong, I know," Jack said, the ghost of a smile tugging at his lips. "But it'll put hair on your chest." He paused, then added, "Figure of speech." Zira managed a weak laugh, filing away the idiom for future reference. As she sipped the coffee, grimacing internally but maintaining a grateful exterior, she observed Jack surreptitiously. He moved to a window, peering out into the storm. The firelight cast half his face in shadow, highlighting a scar that ran from his temple to his jaw. There was a story there, Zira knew, one that might prove useful. "The storm's getting worse," Jack said, turning back to her. "Looks like you'll have to stay the night. We'll try to get help when it clears." Zira nodded, feigning relief while inwardly exulting. An entire night to study this human up close. Her mission might not be a failure after all. "Thank you, Jack," she said, pouring every ounce of sincerity she could muster into her words. "I don't know how to repay your kindness." Jack's eyes met hers, and for a moment, Zira saw a flicker of something, loneliness, perhaps, or a long-buried need for connection. Then it was gone, replaced by his usual guardedness. "Don't mention it," he said gruffly. Anyone would do the same. As Jack turned away to stoke the fire, Zira allowed herself a small, triumphant smile. Phase 1 of her infiltration was complete. Now, the real work would begin. Little did she know, Jack's war-honed instincts were far from dormant. As he poked at the embers, his mind was already cataloging the inconsistencies in his guest's story, the odd mannerisms she thought he hadn't noticed. The storm raged on outside, but inside the cabin, a different kind of storm was brewing. One of secrets, suspicion, and unexpected connections. As the night wore on, the storm outside intensified, rattling the cabin's windows with its fury. Inside, a different kind of storm was brewing, one of cultural misunderstandings and hidden agendas. Zira sat perched on the edge of the armchair, her posture unnaturally stiff as she tried to mimic human relaxation. Jack, sprawled in a chair across from her, watched her with hooded eyes, his face unreadable. "So," Jack broke the silence, his voice gruff. "Where exactly were you headed before your car broke down?" Zira's mind raced, piecing together a plausible story from the limited information she had gleaned about human society. "I was visiting family in Fairbanks," she said, hoping she had correctly remembered the name of a nearby human settlement. Jack's eyebrow raised slightly. "Fairbanks. That's a hell of a drive in this weather. Must be some important family." Zira nodded, sensing a trap but unsure how to avoid it. "Yes, very important. My sister is having a baby." Jack grunted, his tone neutral. "And you thought driving through a blizzard was the best way to get there." Realizing her mistake, Zira scrambled to recover. "I underestimated the weather. It wasn't this bad when I started out." Jack leaned forward, his eyes intense. "You know, it's funny. Your clothes are pretty thin for someone planning a long drive through Alaska in winter." Zira felt a flicker of panic. She had modeled her illusory clothing on images from her ship's database, but hadn't considered regional climate variations. I'm not from around here," she said, trying to inject a note of embarrassment into her voice. "Clearly," Jack said dryly. He stood up abruptly, making Zira flinch. "You hungry?" "I was about to heat up some soup." Relieved by the change of subject, Zira nodded. "Yes, thank you. That would be lovely." As Jack moved to the small kitchenette, Zira took the opportunity to observe him more closely. His movements were efficient, almost graceful despite his large frame. She noticed a slight favoring of his left leg. An old injury, perhaps. Jack returned with 2 bowls of steaming liquid. He handed one to Zira, along with a spoon. "Careful, it's hot," he warned. Zira stared at the spoon, momentarily puzzled. Her species absorbed nutrients through their skin, and the concept of utensils was foreign to her. Noticing Jack's questioning look, she quickly picked up the spoon, mimicking his movements as he began to eat. The soup was a shock to Zira's senses. The temperature, the texture, the explosion of flavors, it was overwhelming. She couldn't suppress a small gasp. Jack's eyes snapped to her face. "Everything okay?" "Yes," Zira managed, forcing herself to take another spoonful. "It's very good. I've never had soup quite like this before." Jack's expression softened slightly. "Old family recipe. My mother used to make it on cold nights like this." Sensing an opportunity to gather more information, Zira pressed gently. "Your mother, does she live nearby?" A shadow passed over Jack's face. "She passed away. Long time ago now." "I'm sorry," Zira said, surprised to find she meant it. The concept of family units was alien to her species, but she could sense the pain in Jack's voice. An uncomfortable silence fell between them. Zira, desperate to maintain her cover, searched for a safe topic of conversation. Her eyes fell on a shelf lined with books. Physical information storage, she realized with fascination. "You read a lot?" she asked, gesturing towards the shelf. Jack followed her gaze. "Yeah, helps pass the time out here." "You like books?" Zira nodded enthusiastically. seizing on the subject. "Oh yes, I love books. Do you have a favorite?" Jack stood and walked to the shelf, running his fingers along the spines. He pulled out a worn volume and handed it to Zira. "Try this one. Hemingway, The Old Man and the Sea. It's about struggle, perseverance. Fitting for a night like this." Zira accepted the book, opening it carefully. Her eyes widened as she saw the rows of symbols covering the pages. She had studied human language, but seeing it in this form was different. She realized with a jolt that she had no idea how to pretend to read this. Jack was watching her closely. "Something wrong?" he asked, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. Zira snapped the book shut. "No, not at all. Thank you. I'll read it later." As she set the book aside, Zira caught a glimpse of Jack's face. The suspicion in his eyes was unmistakable now. She had made a mistake, and they both knew it. The storm howled outside, but inside the cabin, the air was thick with unspoken questions and growing tension. Zira realized that her mission might be in jeopardy. She needed to act fast to regain control of the situation. But as she met Jack's steady gaze, she felt a flicker of doubt. This human was more perceptive, more complex than she had anticipated. For the first time since her crash, Zira felt truly out of her depth. The night was far from over, and Zira sensed that the real challenges were just beginning. The tension in the cabin had reached a breaking point. Jack stood by the fireplace, his posture rigid, eyes never leaving Zira. She remained seated, her mind racing, trying to find a way to salvage her mission. "Who are you really?" Jack's voice cut through the silence, low and dangerous. Zira met his gaze, weighing her options. The deception was crumbling. Perhaps a partial truth could save her. "I'm not here to hurt you, Jack," she said softly. Jack's laugh was harsh and without humor. "Yeah, funny how people who say that are usually about to do just that." He moved suddenly, reaching behind a stack of firewood and pulling out a weathered military-style backpack. Zira tensed, ready for a weapon, but instead, Jack produced a small, sophisticated-looking device. "Pick this up in Afghanistan," Jack said, his tone conversational, but his eyes hard. "It detects anomalies in electromagnetic fields. Been going crazy ever since you arrived." He took a step closer. "So I'll ask again. Who are you?" Zira's hand moved imperceptibly towards a hidden panel on her wrist. "Jack, please. I can explain." "Save it," Jack snapped. "I've seen too much to fall for whatever story you were selling. Are you some kind of spy? Corporate? Military?" As Jack's attention focused on her face, searching for answers, Zira made her move. Her fingers found the hidden panel, and suddenly the air around her shimmered. Jack stumbled back, his eyes wide with shock as Zira's human appearance melted away, revealing her true alien form. Her skin was a pale blue, almost translucent, with patterns of bioluminescence pulsing beneath. 4 obsidian eyes regarded Jack calmly, and her lower face split into mandibles that clicked softly. "What the hell?" Jack breathed, his hand instinctively reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. Zira stood, her movements fluid and alien. "I apologize for the deception, Jack," she said, her voice now carrying an otherworldly harmonic. "But as you can see, the truth is far more complicated than you imagined." Jack's military training kicked in, pushing past the initial shock. He shifted his stance, ready for a fight. "What do you want?" he demanded. "Information," Zira replied simply. "My people are considering first contact with Earth. I was sent to observe, to determine if humans are ready." Jack's eyes narrowed. "And the verdict?" Zira's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "Still undecided. You've proven surprisingly complex." She took a step forward, and Jack tensed. "Your compassion in taking me in was admirable. Your suspicion, equally so. You're a fascinating species, Jack, capable of great kindness and terrible violence." "Sounds like you've got us figured out," Jack said dryly, his mind racing to process this impossible situation. Zira tilted her head, a curiously human gesture. Not entirely. There's still much to learn, which is why I need your help. Jack barked out a laugh. My help? Lady, you've got to be kidding. I'm quite serious, Zira said. She raised her arm, and a holographic display sprang to life between them. This data could determine the future of human-alien relations, but it's incomplete. I need a human perspective, Toe. Her words cut off as Jack lunged, not at her, but at the holographic display. His hand passed through it, but he managed to snag a small device projecting the image from Zira's wrist. Jack, don't. Zira started, but it was too late. The device emitted a high-pitched whine, and suddenly the cabin was plunged into darkness. The fire sputtered and died, and even Zira's bioluminescence dimmed. In the pitch black, Jack heard Zira's voice, now tinged with genuine alarm. What have you done? That was tied into my ship's systems. You've triggered a... Her words were drowned out by a deafening roar from outside. The cabin shook, snow and debris pattering against the roof. As Jack's eyes adjusted to the darkness, he saw Zira moving towards the door. I need to check on my ship, she said urgently. Jack, please. I know you have no reason to trust me, but I'm not your enemy. Come with me. It's not safe here. Jack hesitated, years of training and instinct warring with the impossible reality before him. Outside, the storm howled, mixed with an ominous mechanical groaning. He had a choice to make, and the fate of much more than just his own life hung in the balance. The world outside the cabin was chaos. The blizzard raged with renewed fury, now mixed with an eerie, pulsating light emanating from somewhere in the forest. Jack squinted against the onslaught of snow and wind, trying to keep Zira's alien form in sight as they trudged through knee-deep drifts. Your ship did this, Jack shouted over the howling wind, gesturing at the unnatural storm around them. Zira's voice carried back to him, the alien harmonics barely audible. It's a defense mechanism. The crash must have damaged the containment protocols. As they crested a hill, Jack's breath caught in his throat. In the valley below, Zira's ship lay partially buried in snow, its sleek form pulsing with energy. Arcs of lightning-like plasma danced across its surface, lashing out at the surrounding trees and turning them to ash instantly. We need to shut it down, Zira said, her four eyes fixed on the malfunctioning craft. If the reactor goes critical, it could take out half the state. Jack's mind raced. Part of him still couldn't believe this was happening, that he was standing next to an actual alien, facing a threat straight out of a sci-fi movie. But the soldier in him, the part that had faced down impossible odds before, was already analyzing the situation, looking for a solution. All right, he said, decision made. What do we need to do? Zira turned to him, surprise evident in her alien features. You're going to help me, after everything. Jack shrugged, a wry smile tugging at his lips despite the gravity of the situation. End of the world tends to put things in perspective. Besides, I've got questions, and I can't get answers if we're all vaporized. A sound emerged from Zira that might have been a laugh. Fair enough. We need to reach the main control panel. It's on the far side of the ship. They began to make their way down the slope, the footing treacherous with hidden ice and loose snow. Halfway down, a massive surge of energy from the ship lit up the night sky. Jack lost his footing, tumbling head over heels down the hillside. He came to a stop at the bottom, dazed but largely unhurt thanks to the deep snow. As he struggled to his feet, he realized with a jolt that he could no longer see Zira. Zira, he called out, scanning the chaotic landscape. There was no response. A flicker of movement caught his eye. At first, he thought it was just another energy discharge from the ship, but then he saw it again, a flash of pale blue among the trees, moving away from the ship at high speed. Realization dawned on Jack like a bucket of ice water. Zira was running, abandoning both him and her malfunctioning ship. Damn it, Jack muttered. He should have known better than to trust her, but there was no time for self-recrimination. The ship was still a threat, and now it was up to him to do something about it. Drawing on years of survival training, Jack began to move through the forest, using the trees for cover as he paralleled Zira's path. The alien might have advanced technology, but this was Jack's turf. He knew how to move in this terrain, how to track in these conditions. As he ran, ducking under low-hanging branches and leaping over fallen logs, Jack's mind worked furiously. Why had Zira fled? Was there something on that ship she didn't want him to see? Or was she simply saving herself, leaving him to deal with the fallout? The chase led them deeper into the wilderness, away from the pulsing light of the ship. Jack could see Zira more clearly now, her bioluminescent skin making her a beacon in the darkness. She was fast, but the unfamiliar terrain was slowing her down. Suddenly, Zira stumbled, caught off guard by a hidden dip in the snow-covered ground. Jack seized his chance, putting on a burst of speed. He tackled Zira, both of them tumbling to the ground in a tangle of limbs, human and alien. They came to a stop in a small clearing, both gasping for breath. Jack pinned Zira to the ground, his face inches from her alien visage. "Start talking," he growled. "What's really going on here?" Zira's 4 eyes blinked up at him, and for the first time, Jack saw genuine fear in their depths. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "It's not just my ship we need to worry about," she said. "There's something else out here, something that crashed long before I did. And if it's what I think it is, we're all in terrible danger." The wind howled around them, carrying with it the distant sound of the malfunctioning ship. But underneath it all, barely audible, was a new sound, a low, rhythmic pulsing, coming from somewhere deep in the Alaskan wilderness. Jack and Zira locked eyes, a moment of understanding passing between them. Whatever game they had been playing, whatever secrets and lies had come before, none of it mattered now. They were in this together, for better or worse. The real adventure was just beginning. The clearing fell silent save for the distant rumble of Zira's malfunctioning ship and the eerie pulsing sound emanating from deeper in the forest. Jack's grip on Zira loosened slightly, but his eyes remained locked on her alien features, searching for any sign of deception. "Talk," he commanded, his voice low and intense. "What's out there?" Zira's mandibles clicked nervously. "It's complicated. My people have legends, stories of ancient explorers who ventured too far into the cosmic void. Some never returned. Others came back, changed." Jack's brow furrowed. "Changed how?" "Corrupted," Zira whispered, a shudder running through her alien form. "Merged with something else, something that exists between the stars, in the dark spaces we dare not look too closely at." A gust of icy wind whipped through the clearing, carrying with it a sound that might have been a distant, inhuman shriek. Jack felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. "And you think one of these things is here, on Earth?" he asked, fighting to keep his voice steady. Zira nodded solemnly. "The energy signature from my ship's scanners. It matches the legends. If I'm right, it's been here for centuries, dormant. Until now." Jack released Zira and stood up, pacing the small clearing as he processed this information. "So let me get this straight. You crash land on Earth, lie to me about who and what you are. And now you're telling me there's some kind of cosmic horror movie monster out there that your ship woke up." Zira rose to her feet, her luminescent patterns pulsing with what might have been embarrassment. "When you put it that way, it does sound rather problematic." "Problematic?" Jack laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "Lady, that doesn't even begin to cover it. Why should I believe anything you say?" Zira's 4 eyes blinked in synchronization, a gesture Jack was beginning to recognize as her version of a resigned sigh. "You shouldn't," she admitted. "I've given you no reason to trust me. But Jack, look around you. Look at what's happening. Can you really afford not to believe me?" Jack fell silent, his soldiers' instincts warring with the sheer impossibility of the situation. Finally, he spoke. "All right, let's say I buy this. What's your plan? Because I'm guessing running away isn't going to cut it." "No," Zira agreed, her tone grim. "Running is not an option. We need to contain it, seal it away again before it fully awakens. But to do that, we need access to my ship's systems." Jack's eyes narrowed. "The ship that's currently doing its best impression of a doomsday device." Zira's mandibles twitched in what might have been a wry smile. "Indeed, it seems we face quite the dilemma." "Yeah, no kidding," Jack muttered. He ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. "Okay, so we need to shut down your ship and use it to stop this other thing. Any ideas on how we do that without getting vaporized?" Zira's bioluminescent patterns shifted, taking on a more focused, determined configuration. "I have some thoughts. But Jack, you need to understand something. The technology on my ship, it's far beyond anything your species has developed. If we succeed, you'll have access to knowledge that could fundamentally change your civilization. Are you prepared for that responsibility?" Jack met Zira's alien gaze, his expression hardening. "Are you seriously giving me the prime directive speech right now? In case you haven't noticed, that ship has sailed. Literally." He gestured towards the pulsing light on the horizon. "Your tech is already here, already affecting my world. The question isn't whether humanity is ready for it. The question is whether we're going to use it to save lives or let it destroy us." Zira studied Jack for a long moment, her alien features unreadable. Then, slowly, she nodded. "You continue to surprise me, Jack Hawthorne. Your species is young, yes, but perhaps not as unprepared as I first thought." Jack allowed himself a small, grim smile. "Yeah, well, we humans have a knack for rising to the occasion, especially when the alternative is annihilation." The distant shriek echoed through the forest again, closer this time. Jack and Zira both turned towards the sound, a shared look of determination passing between them. "So," Jack said, checking his meager supplies and squaring his shoulders. "Alien spaceship first, then eldritch cosmic horror." Zira's mandibles clicked in what Jack was beginning to recognize as amusement. "Just another day on Earth, is it?" "Lady," Jack replied, already starting to move towards the glow of the malfunctioning ship, "you have no idea." As they set off together, an unlikely alliance forged in the face of impossible odds. Neither human nor alien could shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a much larger adventure. The fate of two worlds, perhaps the entire galaxy, hung in the balance, dependent on the courage and ingenuity of a disillusioned soldier and a stranded alien scout. The Alaskan wilderness, once so familiar to Jack, now seemed alien and foreboding. But as they pressed on, a spark of hope burned bright in the darkness. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The trek back to Zira's ship was arduous, each step a battle against the howling wind and treacherous terrain. Jack led the way, his human physiology better adapted to the harsh conditions. Zira followed close behind, her alien form shimmering with bioluminescence that cast an eerie glow on the snow around them. As they neared the crash site, the malfunctioning ship came into view. It was a terrifying spectacle. A writhing mass of energy and twisted metal, pulsing with a sickly light that seemed to bend the very fabric of reality around it. "Okay," Jack shouted over the cacophony of wind and energy discharges. "What's the plan?" Zira's 4 eyes narrowed in concentration. "We need to reach the main control panel. From there, I can initiate a shutdown sequence." Jack nodded grimly. "Right. And how do we do that without being turned into cosmic dust?" In response, Zira reached into a hidden compartment in her suit and pulled out 2 small devices. She handed one to Jack. "Emergency force field generators. They should provide some protection against the energy discharges." Jack turned the device over in his hands, marveling at its alien design. "Should." Zira's mandibles clicked in what Jack was beginning to recognize as a nervous gesture. They'd never been tested in these exact conditions. Fantastic, Jack muttered, but he activated the device without hesitation. A shimmering field of energy enveloped him, and he felt a tingling sensation across his skin. Together, they began to approach the ship. The closer they got, the more intense the energy discharges became. Bolts of plasma lashed out at them, only to be deflected by their force fields. But with each impact, Jack could feel the protective barrier weakening. They were mere meters from the ship's entrance when a particularly violent surge of energy erupted from the hull. Jack's force field flickered and died, leaving him exposed. Without thinking, Zira threw herself in front of him, her own field absorbing the brunt of the blast. The impact sent them both tumbling to the ground. Jack scrambled to his feet, pulling Zira up with him. "Are you okay?" he shouted, genuine concern in his voice. Zira nodded, though her luminescent patterns were pulsing erratically. "We need to hurry," she said, her voice strained. "The ship's core is approaching critical mass." They made a final dash for the entrance, diving through just as another energy surge scorched the ground where they had been standing. Inside, the ship was a maze of pulsing conduits and flickering holographic displays. Zira moved with purpose, her hands dancing over control panels as she tried to stabilize the ship's systems. Jack stood guard, watching for any sign of the mysterious threat they had detected earlier. "Jack," Zira called out suddenly, her voice filled with a mix of excitement and trepidation. "I've managed to access the ship's database. The information here, it's beyond anything I expected." Jack moved to her side, his eyes widening as he took in the holographic displays. Star charts, technological schematics, biological data on countless alien species. It was a treasure trove of cosmic knowledge. "This is it, isn't it?" Jack said softly. "The reward you mentioned, all this information." Zira nodded solemnly. "Yes. With this, your species could advance centuries in mere decades. Interstellar travel, clean energy, medical breakthroughs beyond your wildest dreams." Jack's mind reeled at the implications, but at what cost? "You said earlier that we might not be ready for this." Zira's alien features softened, her luminescent patterns taking on a warm, pulsing glow. "I'm beginning to think I was wrong about that. Your actions, your willingness to risk everything to save not just your own world, but mine as well, it speaks volumes about your species' potential." A moment of understanding passed between them, human and alien, two beings from vastly different worlds united by a common purpose. The moment was shattered by a bone-chilling shriek that echoed through the ship. Jack and Zira spun around to see a writhing mass of darkness seeping through the ship's hull, tendrils of void reaching towards them. "It's here," Zira whispered, terror evident in her voice. Jack's hand found Zira's, squeezing it reassuringly. "Then we face it together, for both our worlds." As the cosmic horror advanced, Jack and Zira stood their ground, the wealth of galactic knowledge at their backs and an impossible challenge before them. In that moment, they both realized that the true reward wasn't the information or the technology. It was this, the bond forged between two beings from different stars, the proof that even in the face of cosmic terror, compassion and courage could bridge the gulf between worlds. The final battle was about to begin, and the fate of two species hung in the balance. The void creature surged forward, its amorphous form defying the laws of physics as it phased through solid matter. Jack and Zira stood their ground, the warmth of their joined hands a stark contrast to the cosmic cold emanating from the entity. "Any bright ideas?" Jack asked, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. Zira's eyes darted between the approaching horror and the ship's control panel. "We need to overload the core," she said, her voice tight with concentration. "The energy release should be enough to seal the dimensional rift it's using to manifest." Jack nodded grimly. "And what happens to us in that scenario?" Zira's mandibles clicked softly. "Best case, we're thrown clear of the blast. Worst case, we don't talk about worst cases," Jack finished, He squeezed Zira's hand once before letting go. "Tell me what to do." They sprang into action, a dance of human intuition and alien knowledge. Jack kept the void creature at bay, using the ship's emergency systems to create barriers of energy, while Zira worked feverishly at the controls. The ship groaned and shuddered around them, systems overloading as Zira pushed them beyond their limits. The void creature howled, a sound that resonated in the deepest parts of their minds, promising oblivion. "It's done," Zira shouted over the cacophony. "But the blast sequence, someone needs to stay to manually initiate it." Their eyes met, a universe of understanding passing between them in an instant. "Together," they said in unison. As the void creature made its final lunge, Jack and Zira stood side by side at the control panel. With a shared nod, they placed their hands on the activation switch. The world exploded into light. Jack awoke to the gentle beeping of medical equipment. He blinked, his vision slowly focusing on a sterile white ceiling. For a moment, he thought he might be in a military hospital, the events of the past days nothing more than a vivid dream. Then he turned his head and saw Zira in the adjacent bed, her alien form unmistakable even with various monitoring devices attached to her. "Welcome back," came a voice from the doorway. Jack turned to see a man in a crisp suit, his demeanor screaming government agent. "Where are we?" Jack asked, his voice hoarse. "A secure facility," the agent replied. "You've been unconscious for 3 days. We found you and your friend at the epicenter of what we thought was a meteor strike." Jack struggled to sit up. The void creature. The agent's eyebrow raised slightly. "Gone. Whatever you two did, it worked. Now we have some questions." "I bet you do," Jack muttered. Over the next few hours, as Zira regained consciousness, they recounted their story. The agent listened with increasing astonishment as they described the cosmic horror, the alien technology, and the potential treasures of knowledge contained in Zira's ship. When they finished, the agent was silent for a long moment. "You understand," he said finally, "that this changes everything. The existence of alien life, the technology you described. If this gets out, the world will never be the same." Jack and Zira exchanged a look. "Maybe it shouldn't be the same," Jack said softly. Zira nodded in agreement. "My people have long debated whether humanity was ready for contact. But after what I've seen, what we've been through together, I believe you are not only ready but necessary." The agent frowned. "Necessary? There are wonders out there," Zira explained, her voice filled with passion. "But there are also terrors beyond imagination. Humanity's unique blend of innovation, adaptability, and compassion could be the key to navigating the cosmic waters ahead." Jack reached out, taking Zira's alien hand in his. "We've been given a chance here. A chance to step onto a larger stage, to be part of something greater than ourselves." The agent looked between them, seeing not a human and an alien, but two beings united by shared experience and mutual respect. He nodded slowly. "I'll need to make some calls. This is bigger than any one agency, any one country." As the agent left to set in motion events that would forever change human history, Jack turned to Zira. "So," he said with a small smile, "still think we're too primitive to join your galactic community?" Zira's bioluminescent patterns pulsed with what Jack now recognized as affection. "On the contrary," she said softly, "I think the galaxy isn't ready for you." Outside their window, the sun was rising, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold. It was a new dawn, not just for them, but for all of humanity. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges and wonders in equal measure. But as Jack and Zira watched the sunrise together, their hands intertwined, they knew one thing for certain. Whatever the universe had in store, they would face it side by side. Human and alien, two beings from different worlds, united by a bond stronger than the stars themselves. The adventure was only just beginning.